Hi, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast Ministries Making a Difference. I'm Shara Goswick, your host, and I'm so glad that you're here. Today on the podcast, I speak with Katie Fiola Jones, who has a program called Redeeming Your Finances. Katie uses this program to help people get on a budget and manage their finances the way God designed it to. Our word of the week this week
It's the word of the week.
is alone. Do you ever think that when you're going through a problem, you're the only one that's going through it, that you are alone in facing this one issue, that nobody else has ever dealt with it or is dealing with it now? One of the things that Katie has found in working with people, as she works with individuals and she works with different people together, cohorts, she has found that they realize they are not alone in the struggles that they face. We all face the same things, maybe not at the same time, but we all go through the same things. And isn't it encouraging to hear someone else say, yeah, I went through that and this is what I did and got through it. This is how it got better. We never want to feel alone. And so I love that Katie's doing these classes with people, different people, where they can help each other out and encourage one another and not feel so alone in getting things in order in their finances. This is a great program, and I encourage you to check it out. If you've been looking for any kind of financial instruction or just help to get to a certain place, she's a great person to turn to. Thanks for being here. Have a great day. Hi,
Hello.
how are you?
Great. How are you doing?
Doing well. I'm glad it's Friday.
Yes.
Excited to talk about this. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with other Christian financial programs. I've been through them multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love what you're doing because, you know, in my marriage, I've been married for 32 years and we have been completely out of debt and we have been smothered in debt. So we know both extremes. And we have learned some very hard lessons.
Wow. Yeah.
Trying to do it our own way, or the biggest problem that we had was not communicating in our finances. And that is a big thing for any marriage. You know, you've got to be communicating, but it's also important to do things the way God designed us to do them. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, they're going to work if we do it the way God designed it. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it works a whole lot better when we go according to his plan.
It does.
So tell me why you started this program, Redeeming Your Finances. What was the purpose behind all of it?
Yeah. So kind of like what you were saying, as far as like doing it God's way is obviously the best way to do it. I many years ago, I actually started coaching and teaching about personal finances through my blog. I started blogging in 2018. And at that time, I was convinced that God wanted us all as Christians to achieve financial independence. And if you're not familiar with financial independence, it's the whole idea of like having enough money set aside or generating enough revenue passively in order to not have to work anymore. And
Right.
I basically believed that this is what God wanted for Christians across the board, was like, yeah, why would he not want us to be able, to have enough revenue from our investments in order to not have to work so hard every single day? It sounds so great because then we would have our time freed up to go and pursue whatever he wants us to pursue, right? And I thought
Right.
this sounded beautiful and amazing for Christians. And I know a handful of Christians who already do that, who have enough income coming in or set aside that they don't have to necessarily work super hard at like a 9 to 5 job anymore. And it's really cool. They have a lot of freedom to do whatever they want. They can go and be missionaries. They can go and volunteer all their time. They can, and it sounds amazing. And so I kind of set out to convince other Christians that this is what God wanted for us and for our money. And so I kind of started blogging about that, and I basically was reading the Bible to find evidence for this argument, right? I
Right.
tried to look for my own truth in the Bible. And it wasn't probably until like 2021 or so that I read a book called Redeeming Money by Paul David Tripp that my eyes were really open to, you know, for lack of a better word, the truth, right? It's like
Right.
the truth was that God really just wants our hearts. Like he doesn't
Right.
necessarily need all of our time and he doesn't need all of our money even. He wants us and our hearts and our souls and he wants us to be devoted to him. And what I realized was that I had been devoting all of my time and energy to figuring out how God was going to support me in my endeavor to achieve financial independence. And so I needed to start shifting my own mindset to no, I need to actually read the Bible to find Jesus, not my own truths and not what I want to pursue.
Yeah.
Even if God was wanting me or any other Christian to achieve financial independence, what I recognized was I made all of my financial goals more important than God himself. And so now what I do in my coaching, because again, like I started coaching in 2020 and I was trying to help other Christians achieve this
Right.
goal of financial independence. And I feel sad about it because I was myself blindsided by how the devil had like led me to this place of actually pursuing the prosperity gospel
Right.
because that's really what I was doing. And even when I woke up to that truth, I realized that I was even falling prey to the prosperity gospel in another way, which is just simply saying, okay, if I follow kind of these principles throughout the Bible, then God will give me some kind of comfort in like having a nice home and a nice lifestyle and
Right.
life will just kind of be easy and again, it wasn't something that I was like, this is the truth. It just like in America, especially here in
Right.
like the Western culture, we just kind of we all do it. And it's not, it's like unknowingly. And it's kind of unfortunate because a lot of us as believers really fall prey to this kind of secretive prosperity gospel. Because a lot of us
Right.
think of like the health and wellness, like, oh yeah, health and wealth, and God's gonna give us private jets, right? Because that's so easy to be like, no, I don't fall into that
Right.
bucket. But so many of us fall into like, well, I do think God's gonna like at least give me, a nice job and a good family, and we're all healthy and happy and comfortable, and it's so easy for us to fall into that bucket. So to answer your question, that's a long way to answer it, is that my journey has brought me to this place where I'm like, I need to help believers recognize how they too are falling prey to these different versions of the prosperity gospel. Because God isn't here to give us comforts and wonderful lives and money even, but he really just wants us to be good stewards. And that could mean for some people, yes, like living great, quote unquote, comfortable lives and everything. But it also could look like, for like all the other examples in the Bible of like when Jesus is like, no, I want you to go get rid of everything for me. Like you need to get rid of all of your possessions, sell everything and follow me. And so it could be both ends of the spectrum. But it's just a matter of where your heart is at. And so that's why I coach. This is what I'm doing, is trying to help believers start to shift their perspectives on this. Um, and figure out, what does a budget look like when you're trying to pursue this, because there's not necessarily a one size fits all when it comes to this. Sorry, that was
Right.
a long-winded
No,
answer
that's okay.
for your
That
like,
was
why
all
am I
really
doing it? I'm
good. I
just so
mean,
passionate about it. I'm like, 'cause I
yes,
do it too. So,
I love it. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that we're supposed to have comfortable lives. I
mhm,
wish it did,
I know,
but it doesn't.
I know.
It doesn't at all. So, do you do one-on-one coaching? Do you do groups of people? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, great question. I do offer like, so I do some cohorts coaching
Mhm.
basically. So a little bit of both. I love what comes from group time. Like when we as Christians are bonded together in a similar mission to, again, not necessarily grow our wealth or anything, but just simply like holding each other accountable to figuring out what God is trying to teach us in
Right.
the process of being good stewards. I love what comes from going through a cohort together. And so I offer, these 6-week cohorts to become excellent stewards of our resources and learn
Yeah.
these money management skills that are rooted in the gospel. But I also offer kind of like a course that, you know, individuals and families can go through, kind of a more DIY version of figuring this out. And so you get all the kind of same stuff, but you get to do self-paced, working through it on your own. And yeah, both of them have a lot of benefits, and it just kind of is dependent on what is a better fit for that
Yeah.
individual or couple.
I would think with the groups of people, it's probably encouraging to people to know they're not alone. Going through hard things, it's probably like, oh, good, I'm not the only one. 'Cause I
Absolutely.
felt
It's
like,
so beautiful to see, a few years ago, I had two couples who were on like different ends of the country here in the US, and they were going through such similar
wow,
situations that it was actually so cool to see how they developed a relationship.
yeah,
And so beyond like what I could teach them, they were able to kind of learn from one another to be like,
wow,
here's what we're kind of doing and learning, and here's what God is teaching us. And
yeah,
and that's something that I can't produce on my own. That's only something
right.
that God can do. And just, yeah, it's so beautiful how he can kind of bring people together like that.
Yeah, that's amazing. What do you think is a common problem that people, especially Christians, because that's, a lot of what you're doing. What is a common problem that they are facing
Yes.
in their finances?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I was actually thinking about it the other day that so many of the clients and students that I work with, inside of Redeeming Your Finances come to me thinking that their biggest problem is they don't have enough money to pay for their responsibilities and bills, and to cover everything, but also to be generous and to pursue the things that God is calling them to do, like supporting missionaries or becoming a missionary themselves or starting a business that God has placed on their hearts. They kind of come to me thinking like, how do I make more money? Um, but after working together, one of the interesting things that happens is that they recognize that the problem isn't that they need more money, it's that they need to learn to manage what they already have
Right.
better. And then they find that they have a lot of the resources that they thought that they needed to bring in order to then go and
Yeah.
pay for their bills and their responsibilities, take care of their families, but also set aside money to start that business or set aside money to, my husband and I are foster parents, and being foster parents can be quite expensive because there's a lot of upfront costs of just like bringing kiddos into your home. And it's like
Sure.
just that shift of trying to reorganize, and reprioritize really is the main issue. Is just figuring out like what are our actual priorities, and
Right.
how do we make the things that God is calling us to like that top priority. Because again, like going back to the idea of like comforts and just having a good life, like when we kind of set aside some of those desires that we
Right.
have, we can easily start to align our finances more to prioritize the things that God is calling us to. And it's not to say even that we have to totally deny ourselves everything good in life,
Right.
because at the same time when we do that, when we eat, like when we go to the rice and beans diet and
Right.
then just say like, God wants us to give away all of our money here, and then we can get really burnt out,
Right.
in trying to do that. There's a lot of people who do that successfully, but I think many of us need to kind of ease our way into, just being fully on board with some of the way that God might be wanting us to spend or use our money.
Right.
But I think he really does. He does want us to enjoy some of the pleasures that we have here,
Mhm.
um, in the meantime. And I think that also there's so much beauty in taking a vacation with our families,
Right.
because that really, it builds marriages, it builds families up, just that intentional time together. So yeah, just trying to reprioritize, I think, is challenge, the number
Right.
one challenge that we face as believers.
Yeah. Yeah, I can say from experience, we went through a time where we lost a lot. And so I've mostly been a homemaker, but I went to work for 5 years, and all of the money that I made, not that I was making millions of dollars, but all of it went to debt
Yeah.
because we were in such a bad position. And it was tight for a while, but sometimes you have to get to that point
Mhm.
where, okay, this isn't working anymore and I have to do what I have to do, whether it's going to be wonderful later or not. You got to make that decision. Do I want to keep living like this, or do I want to do, what I can do to make it right? And it was hard, but it worked out. The Lord provided, and we needed to learn some lessons. I will say that. There were
Yeah.
some lessons we needed to learn. So how does your program work? If somebody is listening and they say, I need help with my finances, I want to do this right, what do they do with your program? How does that work?
Yeah. So again, I kind of offer the two different options of the cohorts. So if it is something that if an individual or a couple really needs the added accountability and support, I always offer and recommend going through with kind of the coaching kind of cohort um, that comes up every, you know, couple months. We offer the cohorts. So depends on, if that's coming up, but getting started even just in the course is a really great way to just get started in the process. I offer a lot of free resources for people to jump in and get started immediately, no matter where they're at with their finances,
That's
because
great.
obviously so many individuals and couples come to me who are in a similar place that you were,
Yeah.
years ago, where they're like, I have nothing right now, and I really just need the bare minimum, kind of getting started in this.
Right.
And I think that, recognizing when you need help is so important, and just diving in no matter where you're at, and not necessarily waiting for the money to come to be able to invest in a
Right.
program like this, and just starting to learn where you can, because I think what's so great about today is that there are a lot of free resources for
Yeah.
individuals and couples to gain from YouTube, or from creators like myself. And so, I host free workshops once a
Oh,
month
wow.
to just get started. My kind of signature workshop is developing a gospel-centered budget.
That's awesome.
And what does that look like, and how do we actually start to shift our perspective from being more self-centered to being gospel-centered with our
Right.
finances? And so, my goal with all of my content is to help people get first and foremost the faith aspect of finances, because that is when we build anything on the truth of the gospel, that's
Yeah.
when something is going to be strong enough to last a lifetime.
Right.
And so that's my goal first, is to get people recognizing how the gospel impacts our finances, but then also equipping people with more of the practical side of, like, yeah, let's develop a budget, because that's going to be beneficial and helpful to actually managing your money. And
Right.
so that's kind of, at the end of the day, what I really am trying to equip people with is both of those aspects, because you can't have one or the other. Um, and so, yeah, it kind of just means diving into some of the free stuff, and then figuring out, is it beneficial to work with
Right.
a counselor or a coach like myself? And so there's a lot of options out there for people in different stages of their financial journeys.
Yeah. I think sometimes, and I mean, this was for us, but I know I saw it in other people too. Sometimes just developing a budget for the very first time, that'll tell you whether or not you need help, because sometimes it's a shock. People don't like people that don't have a budget, and I don't know how they function, but anyway, that sometimes is a big shock for people. Like, oh, this is why I don't have any money because
Absolutely.
you know what I mean? It's eye opening. Is there a story that you can share? Maybe if somebody's listening and they're thinking they just feel overwhelmed and under, their heads underwater and they know they need help, but is there a story that you can share that would encourage somebody that, you saw some great progress or great things that happened to
Yeah,
somebody?
absolutely. So, kind of going off of what you said about like when you develop a budget for the first time and how eye-opening it can be, um, many of the students and clients that I work with have their most transformational moments pretty early on of working together. I walk them through what I call the stewardship report, and it's this process of looking through and combing through all of the last few months of your expenses. And so we kind of do like a cash flow statement is, the technical term of it, but I
Right.
like to call it a stewardship report to see, where is your money coming in and where is it going out to?
Right.
And one of the cool moments, I had a client, this is actually several years ago, but it's still so impactful of a story. His name is Lorenzo, and Lorenzo went through this stewardship report. And when we got on our coaching call, and this is true of so many clients of mine that they get on that call after they've gone through doing the stewardship report and going
Yeah.
back and doing the money tracking, and they are like, I always knew I had a money cash flow kind of problem, but I never really realized exactly where all of my money was going until doing this exercise. And it's
Yeah.
a really tedious exercise because it's literally just taking all of your expenses and income and putting it all in one place. But once you have this information in front of you, you can start to see the leaks in the boat. And when you
Yes.
start to see how much money you're spending on even just little things like coffee or going out to eat, or how much you're spending on groceries when you didn't think you were spending
Right.
several $100s more than your mind was telling you were
Yeah.
spending. Once you have that information, it's much easier to start to do that reprioritizing we were talking about and saying like, okay, I didn't know that I was spending hundreds of dollars on coffee or on eating out. I
Yeah.
had a client who didn't realize how much money they were spending on clothes every single month. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's so silly. I had no idea I was spending over $100 every single month on just
Oh,
like thrift store purchases
yeah.
even. And so Lorenzo was going back to his story is one of those people who saw it, and he just light bulbs were going off, and he's like, this is much easier than I actually expected it to be. And so he just started making changes right there, and he's like, I can cut this out and I can stop doing this and I can cut back on this. And it was so cool just to see like
Yeah.
those light bulbs happening in that time together, and then just how much she was able to start saving and putting towards, generosity and giving. The same thing happened with a couple, and this was probably a year ago, who kind of had a similar moment of going through this money tracking process, and then they were able to pay off like two of their credit cards, and then they started giving for the very first time ever.
Oh, wow.
And they were like, I just didn't know the joy that could come from actually giving my money away when I felt when they were feeling like they should be paying it towards their debt or something like that. And again, I think that's what's so beautiful too about this process is there's no one size fits all. And I'm never going to tell people you must pay off all of your debt
Right.
immediately, because who am I to tell you when God might be telling you to put your money towards the debt or to give money away.
Right.
And that's what my goal is, to help people really recognize the voice of the Holy Spirit when the Holy Spirit is saying, nope, this month you're going to be giving $100 to this person because they need help with their groceries. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really beautiful to get to watch.
I guess so. That is wonderful. I love all of this. And I know, like I said, from experience, I know how important it is. And it's important as a Christian, especially to do this the Lord's way. I mean, it's not going to work right if you don't do it His way. So I think what you're doing is wonderful. Is there anything that I have not asked you about? that you want to tell me?
Yeah. Great question. Even just like, yeah, what haven't we talked about that is so important? Um, actually, I would love to share with the listener who is out there who's like, I've got kids and I want to start to teach them
Yeah.
about finances because that's actually one of the biggest questions that people come to me with is
Oh, wow.
not only how can I help myself and our family's finances in
Right.
general, but how do I start to teach my children some of these things as well? And and I would say to that person, that mom who's listening right now, who's like, I want to start doing this and modeling it for my child, and it starts with you. So you need to ask yourself, what am I teaching my kids by not teaching my kids
Right.
explicitly about money? Because so my students go through a process where they're learning their own money stories. So
Mm-hmm.
they figure out who have my money influencers been and what did
Yeah.
they teach me, either by sitting me down and teaching me about money, or what did I learn from how they interacted with money. And so you as a parent can start to reflect on, what do I teach my kids about, like when I bring in my paycheck? Do I celebrate this paycheck and then go spend it all and just say, yay, it's payday? What does that teach your kids about money?
Right.
Or, what are you teaching your kids through the way that you're spending your money? What are you prioritizing that they're seeing? Again, it's subtle. Like you might not be very loudly saying anything about money, but even
Right.
in those moments of silence, you kind of start to reflect like what are my kids picking up about money in this instance? And
Yeah.
so and you don't necessarily need to sit your kids down and give them a lesson about budgeting or saving or spending. You don't have to do that. It's just in your day-to-day interactions.
Yeah.
And I know anyone who's a parent and sees that, like they already know their kids pick up
Right.
on little things, right? When you hear
Right.
them say something that you're like, where did they hear that? And then you remember, oh my gosh, I was just complaining about grandma and now they're upset at grandma. Just little things like
Listen.
that. It's the same thing when it comes to money. So we
Yeah.
need to be really conscious of what we're saying through just our actions and interactions
Mm.
with money, and what that's teaching our children. So
That's
yeah,
great.
I that's just the most basic. You don't have to sit down and give them a lesson. You can
Right.
teach them through how you're walking through the grocery store even. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's wonderful. That's such a great idea because that's not something that, I mean, my kids are all grown. It's not something that we ever did. And of course, we didn't have any money to talk about. So for a long time, but it's not something that we purposefully, did. So that's a great idea. I love that.
Mm.
Thank you for talking to me. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and a wonderful evening. And
Great. And then yeah, send me all the stuff when it's
okay,
posted and I'm happy to share it with
yeah,
my
it'll be a little bit. It'll be February, but I
great,
will keep you
no
kind of
problem.
posted on everything. So, alrighty,
Wonderful.
you have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Sounds good. You too. Take
Alrighty,
care.
okay, bye bye.